After studying this module, you will be able to understand the psychodynamic therapy and able to know the basic techniques of Freudian psychoanalysis and be able to evaluate the psychodynamic therapy. Psychodynamic therapy, it is a technique of treating mental disorders by psychological means. Secondly, a procedure for the investigation into those human psychical processes which are not accessible otherwise. And thirdly, a psychological theory based on the psychological data obtained from the above mentioned investigation, which has been accumulated under a scientific discipline, and it emphasizes in a major way the unconscious mental processes. Psychoanalysis may be said to a product of 20th century with Sigmund Freud's publication of Interpretation of Dreams in the year 1900. Freud, the renowned neurologist and physician of Vienna, himself coined the term psychoanalysis. Freud's two mentors, the Viennese physician Joseph Breuer and the Persian physician J.M. Charcot, were also associated with the discovery of psychoanalysis. The therapy is practiced into two basic forms: classical psychoanalysis and psychoanalytically oriented psychotherapy. As developed by Freud and his immediate followers, classical psychoanalysis is an intensive, at least 3 sessions per week, a long-term procedure for uncovering repressed memories, thoughts, fears, and conflicts stemming from problems in early psychosexual development and helping individuals come to terms with them in light of the realities of adult life. In psychoanalytically oriented psychotherapy, the treatment and the idea guiding it may depart substantially from the principles and procedures laid out by orthodox Freudian theory, yet the therapy is still loosely based on psychoanalytical concepts. For example, many psychoanalytical oriented psychotherapists schedule less frequent sessions, for example, once per week, and sit face to face with the client instead of having the latter recline on a couch with the analyst out of sight behind him or her. Likewise, the relatively passive stance of psychoanalytic, primarily listening to the client's free association and rarely offering interpretations, is replaced with an active conversational style in which the therapist attempt to clarify distortions and gaps in the client's construction of the origin and consequences of his problem, so challenging clients' defenses as they present themselves. We will examine Freud's original treatment method in part because of their historical significance and enormous influence. Freudian psychoanalysis. The term psychoanalysis refers not only to the Freud's theory of personality but also to the specific approach to treatment that he developed. The goal of psychoanalysis is to help clients achieve insight, the conscious awareness of the psychodynamic that underlie their problem. Such awareness permits clients to adjust their behavior to their current life situations rather than repeating the maladaptive routines learned in the childhood. Analysts believe that as the client repeatedly encounters and deals with long buried emotions, motives, and conflicts within and outside therapy, the psychic energy that was previously devoted to keeping unconscious conflict under control can be released and redirected to more adaptive ways of living. We will describe basic techniques of this form of psychotherapy. First, free association. Second, analysis of dream. Third, analysis of resistance. Fourth, analysis of transference. Fifth, counter transference. First, free association. The basic rule free association is that individual must say whatever comes to mind, regardless of how personal, painful or seemingly irrelevant it may be. Usually, a client lies in a relaxed position on a couch and gives running account of all the thoughts, feelings and desires that come to mind as one idea lead to another. The therapist usually takes a seat behind the client so as not to disrupt the free flow of association in any way. Freud believes that mental events are meaningfully associated with one another, so that clues to the content of the unconscious can be found in the ongoing stream of thoughts, memories, images and feelings that we experience. The analysis does not expect that free association will necessarily lead directly to unconscious material, but rather it will provide clues concerning important themes or issues. Analytical interpretation involves a therapist tying together a client disconnected ideas, belief and action into meaningful explanation between his maladaptive behavior and the repressed events and fantasies that drive it. Analysis of dream. Dream analysis placed psychoanalysis from a therapeutic process to full-fledged deep psychology. Dream is the phenomena when unconscious is demonstrated. In dreams, the function of id, ego and superego and the conflicts among them are easily understandable. Knowledge gained through dream made it possible to understand the pattern of diseased as well as the normal mind. It was found that the dynamics of the formation of dream and that of the symptom are the same. Dream and disease are both outcome of the conflict among the three id, ego and superego, whereas the dream is temporary and disease continues. Moreover, the dream is a way of fulfilling the unconscious wishes. It has an adaptive value. The tension due to unfulfilled desires are released in dream. Therefore, dream brings the palliative influence on mind. Contrary, the disease is painful, brings suffering to the mind and is maladaptive. The knowledge of dream is very illuminating. It shows the mental mechanism which is responsible for producing pathological state and is also found to be present in normal mind. It is said that the interpretation of dream in the Royal Road to the knowledge of unconscious activities of the mind. The formation of dream can occur in two ways: an unsocial or unattainable impulse which in our waking and real life situations is not practical and hence is generally suppressed, find its way during sleep to exert influence upon the ego. The ego in sleep withdraws itself from reality. The suppressed material of the waking life finds a passage towards manifestation in dreams. A repressed thought or desire may achieve reinforcement during sleep from the unconscious element. That reinforcement may cause the repressed thought or desire to come out in dream by shutting down the resistance of the ego. Understanding of the dream phenomena has led psychoanalysis to evolve its own particular and specialized technique for the treatment of mental patients. The dream itself is a state of severe mental disorder, a psychosis with all its complicated network, but it is of a short duration, and with awakening the ego again comes to normal functioning. The disorganized ego comes to the analyst for help. The analyst, who represents for reality and at the same time an ally from outside, has to help the sick ego in its fight against its internal enemies. The position of the analysis is like reality word, which helps the ego in reality testing and in regaining reality sense after it comes out of illusions and delusions during sleep state. With the break of a sleep, the analyst and the sick ego work together as a unit to overcome the pressure of the id and the superego. The analyst helps the client arrive at understanding of what the symbol in the dream might really represent. So, dream has two types of content: manifest content, which is the dream as it appears to the dreamer, and the second, latent content, which consists of the actual motive that are seeking expression but are so painful or unacceptable that are disguised. An analysis of resistance during the free association or of associating to dream, an unwillingness or inability to talk about certain thoughts, motives or experiences. For example, a client may talking about an important childhood experience and then suddenly switch topic, perhaps stating it's really not that important or it is too absurd to discuss. Resistance may be evidenced by the clients giving a interpretation of some association or coming late to an appointment or even forgetting an appointment altogether, because resistance prevents painful and threatening material from entering awareness. Its sources must be sought if an individual is to face the problem and learn to deal with it in a realistic manner. An important task of the analysis to explore the reasons for resistance, both to promote insight and to guard against the ultimate resistance, the client's decision to drop out therapy prematurely. Analysis of transference. Transference is a form of relationship between the patient and the analyst. It is a transference of feelings onto the person of the physician. This relationship crop up as a universal phenomenon during the course of the psychoanalytic treatment. This phenomena distinguishes psychoanalysis from any other form of psychotherapy. Transference is a pivotal point which the theoretical and technical aspects of psychoanalysis evolve. Transference is the experiencing of feeling, desires, attitudes, fantasies and defense towards a person in the present which do not fit that person but are a repetition of reaction originating in regard to significant persons of early childhood, unconsciously displaced onto figure in the present. Like other psychoanalytical concepts, the concept of transference developed in a progressive way with the maturity of Freud's experience and thinking. He first mentioned it in his book Studies on Hysteria. He described it as the result of false connection because old relationships and feelings are transferred by the patient onto the person of the physician through a false connection. So feelings connected with the past wishes emerge and become experienced in the present as a consequence of the false connection. Freud thought it to be an obstacle to the treatment, as this relationship gives rise to resistance and it would be impossible to carry on analysis unless this resistance is met. Freud narrates his first experience with a patient regarding transference as follows. In one of my patients, the origin of a particular hysterical symptoms lay in wishes which she had many years earlier, and they are into the unconscious that a man she was talking to at that time might boldly take the initiative and give her a kiss. On one occasion at the end of the session, a similar wish came in her about me. She was horrified at it, spent sleepless nights, and at the next session, though she did not refuse to be treated, was quite useless for work. Transference may be of two types, positive and negative. The feeling and other mental states which are of affectionate nature are called positive. It occurs when a client transfers feeling of intense affection, dependency or love to the analyst, and based on past relationships, and those which are of a holistic nature are named as negative. Both the types may arise in the patient during the course of psychoanalysis. Analysts believe that until transference reactions are analyzed and resolved, there can be no resolution of the client's problem. In psychoanalytical treatment, it is found that the patient's interest is focused on the analyst and the symptoms of the disease are replaced by a different reaction toward the analysis. When this situation is achieved, it is called transference. Countertransference. Like transference, countertransference is also a manifestation of the doctor-patient relationship occurring in psychoanalytical treatment situation, but it differs from the former in that it is viewed from the doctor's total feelings towards his patients arising and reaction of the patient's influence upon his unconscious. Like transference reaction of the patient, if not handled properly, if the counter-transference reactions of the therapist should be properly controlled. Therefore, the psychoanalyst must always be aware of his own reactions and be on the guard and be able, on the strength of his analytical training and insight, to tackle this phenomena. Analysis ability in unregard will yield success in his analytical work. So like transference, this can also be regarded as a useless tool in the hands of a therapist. So in psychiatric practice, the physician must be aware of the phenomena in his own mind, because this may lead to him, if not properly understood, to wrong diagnosis and management. Interpretation. How can an analyst help clients detect and understand resistance and the meaning of dream symbols and transference reactions? Interpretation is any statement by the therapist that is intended to provide the client with insight into his behavior or dynamics, and the interpretation from the statement confronts the client with something that may have not previously admitted to consciousness. A general rule in psychoanalytical treatment is to interpret which is already near the surface and just beyond the client's current awareness. Offering deep interpretation of strongly defended unconscious dynamics is considered poor technique, because even if they are not correct, such interpretations are far removed from the client's current awareness and they cannot be informative or helpful. Psychodynamic therapies since Freud. The original version of psychoanalysis is practiced only rarely today. It is costly in time, money and emotional commitment. It may take several years before all major issues in the client's life have been satisfactorily resolved. In classical psychoanalysis, it is not uncommon for a client to be seen 5 times a week or 5 years or more. Today, however, many therapists' commitment both impractical and unnecessary. Their conclusion is supported by psychotherapeutic studies that measure the degree of improvement that occurred over the course of psychotherapy. Psychodynamic therapists are adopting briefer and more economical approach like psychoanalysis. Brief psychodynamic psychotherapy focuses on understanding the maladaptive influences of the past and relating them to current patterns of self-defeating behavior. Many of these brief psychotherapy utilizes basic concepts from psychoanalysis such as importance of insight and the use of interpretation, but they apply them in a very focused and active fashion. The therapist and the client likely to sit together facing each other, and the conversation typically replaces free association. Clients are seen one or more times a week rather than daily. The goal is typically limited to helping the client deal with specific life problems rather than attempting a complete rebuilding of the client's personality. Therapy is therefore more likely to focus on the client's life situations rather than on past childhood experiences, and it may involve teaching the client specific interpersonal and emotional control skills. One recently developed interpersonal therapy focuses almost exclusively on clients' current relationship with more important people in their lives. This highly structured and seldom takes longer than 15 to 20 sessions. Therapeutic goals include resolving role disputes such as marital conflict, adjusting to the loss of a relationship or to a changed relationship, and identifying and correcting deficits in social relationships that make it difficult for the client to maintain satisfying relationships. The therapist collaborates very actively with the client in finding solutions to these problems and may invite the client to link issues in current relationship and thereby showing that what happened in the past need not to be carried out in the present. Evaluating psychodynamic therapy. One of the functions of the psychoanalysis is to treat mental disorders. With the advent of psychoanalysis, with its determinism in the field of mental disorders, everything there, the myths of experiences, behavior, imagination, thought, fantasy, and action. For example, all symptoms were given proper meaning and appropriate place in the cause and effect chain. The real importance of psychoanalysis rests with the fact that it did not remain confined within the sphere of abnormal mind or mental disorders. It stretched its investigation into the functioning of normal human mind, developing itself as an independent science of human mind. Psychoanalysis has shown in a new way the uniformity of human mind all over the world. Man's joy and sorrow, his love and hate, and his fear and courage are similar everywhere. The validity of psychoanalysis as a therapeutic measure has been challenged by many. Among them, Ising is the most famous person, and he rejects the efficacy of psychoanalysis altogether on the basis of his research data. According to him, percentage of cure among the patient without the use of psychoanalysis is very high, whereas those in whom psychoanalysis was used are found to be cured in a significantly lower percentage. It is very difficult to assess the result of psychoanalysis properly because there is no valid and dependable method for assessment of basic psychodynamic variables, and it has never been said that psychoanalysis has been able to explain satisfactorily all the phenomena of human life. It is an for a science that it attempts at explaining the immense number of facts with a minimum number of assumptions at the same time, raises new and appropriate questions, invites further application and explanation, and in this way it remains open. So, the achievement of psychoanalysis lies in its being a science, or as a scientific method. Classical psychoanalysis is routinely criticized by outsiders for being relatively time consuming and expensive, for neglecting clients' immediate problems in search for unconscious conflicts in the remote past. So, for being no adequate proof of its general effectiveness, there have been no rigorous, controllable outcome studies of classical psychoanalysis. So, this is understandable given the intensive and long-term nature of the treatment and the methodological difficulties inherent in testing such as approach. There are some promising hints in this treatment approach that it has some value. In contrast, there is much more research on some of his newer psychodynamically oriented approaches, although research showing that this form of therapy works for a specific diagnosis is still generally lacking. Summary: psychological treatment is aimed at reducing abnormal behavior in individuals through psychological means. The goal of psychotherapy include changing maladaptive behavior, minimizing or eliminating stressful environmental conditions, reducing negative affect, and improving interpersonal competencies, resolving conflicts, modifying people's inaccurate assumptions about themselves. Many approaches to psychological treatment have been developed to treat individuals with psychological treatment. Classical psychoanalysis was originated a century ago by Sigmund Freud. It is rarely practiced today, and there is a little empirical support for its efficacy. Several variants of therapy have developed out by psychoanalytical tradition. These diverge from classical psychoanalysis on matters such as duration of therapy, the role of primitive psychosexual drives in personality dynamic. The therapist is listening for the core emotional and relationship themes that surface again and again. One way for the therapist to understand core themes is to watch the way the client begins to relate to the therapist. Some clients express helpless, perhaps a clue for underlying conflicts between the helplessness and autonomy. Others develop fear that the therapist is secretly annoyed at them, perhaps providing a clue that the client has internalized an idea of relationship as overly punitive. To help the client gain insight, a core aspect of these interventions is interpretation, in which the therapist points out patterns in relationships and emotions that a client may not have released, and insight is conceptualized as a process in which the client develops a new understanding, and with this understanding experience a cathartic release of emotions. And it is worth noting that the core goal of psychodynamic treatment is to improve insight and self-understanding. Symptom reduction is expected to happen as a consequence of this improved awareness, but it is not a central concern. Many of the newer psychodynamic forms of treatment emphasize the way interpersonal processes are affected by early interaction with the parents and other family members.